Live from a bunker in the heart of the Ozarks, a podcast that has had a host named Milton this whole time. It's Sif Pop. Welcome to Sif Pop Weekly, streaming live most weekends, are available to download later in your podcast feed. Unless, of course, you're a patron.
Patrons get perks.
Patrons get those perks.
Bird.
I'm your host, Aaron Dicer, and he's got the music and I've got the lyrics. It's Andrew Ormsby, ladies and gentlemen.
Ahoy!
Each week we'll chat about movies, television, and whatever else from the pop culture universe is on our minds. And please welcome our guest this week. We love her accent because we don't got none. It's Alice Ginevra Michelli.
G'day.
G'day to you as well. I apologize right off the bat, Alice. I went brain blank on the pronunciation of your last name and went with Michelli. Please tell me I was at least close.
It's Michelli.
I knew it. Stupid brain. I'll
forgive you because at least you didn't go Michelli, which is normal default.
Yeah,
so you halfway, 50%. I'll give you a solid 50%.
Listen, I can tell you what my brain was. My brain was like, no, it's McKelly. It's McKelly. You know it's McKelly. And then there was just that little part inside of you that's like, don't trust yourself. You don't know anything. Don't trust yourself. Say it the other way.
Well, anyhow. I'm glad that you listen to the voice in your head that tells you not to trust yourself. That's a great...
That should say something, right? Yeah, that should say something. Well, we are excited to be hanging out with you both for the live video show, which, by the way, if you're listening to this on the podcast, you are always free to join us live on the weekend as we record it. Stay tuned to my Twitter for notifications on when that's happening and when that will go live. And if you're joining us on the podcast, thank you for that as well. We've got a show this morning. I should say this afternoon. This morning for Alice, this afternoon for us, or tomorrow morning for Alice.
I'm in the future.
That's right.
Future person.
We are going to talk about the Suicide Squad out on HBOMax and in theaters, and Vivo out on Netflix this past week. So yeah, we're going to talk about that. We're going to do a best ever challenge. Michael Rooker showing up in both of these movies, and so we're going to do best ever Michael Rooker films. This is my new goal each week, is to find something that ties the movies together. And this week it was Michael Rooker. So we'll be doing that. And then, of course, we'll have our buried treasure as well. If you guys are ready, we'll just go ahead and get right into it. Let's talk a little bit about the Suicide Squad. Supervillains Harley Quinn, Bloodsport, Peacemaker, and a collection of nutty cons at Belle Reve Prison join the super secret, super shady Task Force X as they are dropped off at the remote enemy-infused island of Corto Maltese. This is, as mentioned, on HBOMax. It is also in theaters. This is a very, very well talked about sequel reboot thing to the original Seek Boot to the original maligned but Oscar-winning Suicide Squad from David Ayer. And really, at the end of the day, that will determine which movie is better. Which one wins the most Oscars. Stars John Cena as Peacemaker. Margot Robbie is back as Harley Quinn. You've got people like Pete Davidson, Sylvester Stallone, Nathan Fillion, Joel Kinnaman, Taika Waititi. We mentioned Michael Rooker, Idris Elba as Bloodsport, and many, many others joining and doing their part in the Suicide Squad. What did you guys think? Did you like it, love it, dislike it, hate it, or it was just okay, Alice?
Okay, well, I need to give some context first as to what headspace I was in when I was watching this. So, for those of you who don't know, Melbourne, Australia, where I live, is currently in lockdown, number 6. Thanks, Delta variant. And so basically, as a result, when it got announced, I had 3.5 hours to get to a cinema, watch the movie, and get back home before lockdown was in place.
Oh, wow.
Which I did successfully, because basically we found out at 4:30 in the afternoon, and it was going to go into effect at 8 o'clock. So I had a little bit, 3.5 hours. And I did. I found a 5:15 session. Me and my partner got in an Uber, scheduled it, got in the Uber, made it there just in time. And then I, I don't know if this is going to be. I'm sure it'll be one more thing, Andrew. But we didn't stay for the post-credit scenes because it was 7:35 and we had 25 minutes to get home.
Oh wow.
So yeah, which we did, which is all good. So
Good
that
job.
was my headspace, and so as a result, there was a lot going on, and I am tempted to say I loved it, but I'm not ready to commit there yet. So I'm just going to
Okay.
say high side of really liked it.
High side of really liked it, possibly able to talk yourself into loving it as we have this conversation, is what it sounds like. Andrew, what about you?
I'm going to also go with high side of really liked it. Very close to loving it, but there are a few things that I can't forgive is the wrong word, but there are a few things I can't forgive or get over to keep me from saying I loved it.
Okay. Well, I'm definitely not going first. I am debating between high side of didn't liked it and low side of it was just okay. I'm landing in didn't liked it. And by the end of this, I may have talked myself into just like didn't like it. So I'm not the one to start here. So you two sounds like you're pretty much on the same page. Alice needs a little more convincing. Andrew, so why don't you start? What are some of the things you loved about this movie?
For one, this movie understood compared to, and I think this is what a lot of people do whenever this movie was coming out. How is it going to compare to the other Suicide Squad movie?
Sure.
You know,
That's natural.
So,
it's normal. Yeah.
Yeah. This is so much better than the other one. I'll just say that, obviously. But this one...
Low bar. Lowest bar of all low bars.
It is a low bar. But yeah. it understood the tone of, the Suicide Squad. And what makes the Suicide Squad, a group of villains that you want to root for. It understands what makes that happen. And I think having James Gunn at the helm, he knows how to do great team movies like that, and B, he knows how to do crazy movies too. So I think that he was just the perfect fit for this. A lot of people are saying that they don't know if this is a sequel or a reboot. I'm saying this is a straight up sequel. I'm saying this is
right. It's the same cast.
James Gunn said it's not.
Well,
I know, but it doesn't matter what he said. Viola Davis is playing the same character. Like, it has to be,
I mean, I agree. I'm just saying, I read the trivia point and I was like, then why'd you cast the same people?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
He can say all he wants, but whether you have Viola Davis, Margot Robbie, and what's his name? Trevor, I forget his name, but yeah, you have like 4 people in this movie who are also in the other Suicide Squad movie. So, yeah, it doesn't matter what you say.
Trevor?
Well, no, Jai Courtney also, but
you're talking about Joel Kinnaman, I think.
Joel Kinnaman, there we go.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brian.
No, Trevor.
Yeah, Trevor's close enough to Joel.
Don't trust your brain. Actually, do. I don't know. Maybe don't. I don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows?
But you have like 4 or 5 people. At that point, it doesn't matter what you say. So that's it. A lot of the movie, whether you like it or not, rests on the shoulders of James Gunn, and I think he did a great job.
Yeah. What about you, Alice? What are some thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. First of all, I will say that I really loved the opening. I won't say anything more about why, but you guys will know what I'm talking about. And I think what it does is it perfectly sets the tone for the movie. Once you've gotten through that first bit, you're like, okay, I know what I'm in for. All right. And then you can just settle in and enjoy the ride. And that's what my experience was. I will say I also really enjoyed just the performances. I think everyone was just having a great time, and you could tell, and that made me have a great time. Like, and I did also note, I read that James Gunn specifically chose these characters because they were kind of like back issue villains of the DC, universe, and not many people would know who they are. And he also, in line with that, got a lot of character actors that a lot of that face sort of people, which I also really enjoyed because I definitely had that, especially the guy who played the polka dot villain. I was like, oh, he's the guy from like Ant-Man and Dark Knight, and he's always there, but you never know who he is. So that was something I really enjoyed as a little, oh yeah, throughout the movie as well. But yeah, character performances and the opening, which I'll also say very violent. Like the movie's very violent, and if you don't like very violent, Yeah. Well, when I saw it was rated R18 plus in Australia because for those of you who don't know, in Australia, often when Americans have movies that are rated R, they're not rated R here. They're rated what we call MA15 plus. So it's rare for something to get an R18 plus rating here unless it's like a horror movie. So when I saw that, I was like, really? And then the opening happened and I was like, yep.
Oh,
Yep,
yeah,
that makes
really,
sense.
really.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Neither of you guys really talked about some of the stuff I thought you might, and we still can, obviously. So I'll bring up some of the things that I understand why people love this movie for. You did mention the performances. I do think that is one of them. Sense of humor is another one. James Gunn is a really funny. Like he really gets timing. He understands why humor works, how it plays out. He understands how humor relates to character development, which is really important. So yeah, there's, this is obviously a very technically proficient movie. Like it's a movie that understands how to engage you. The cinematography is actually really impressive here. There's some incredible shots, some really creative choices. And if I were to enjoy this movie, or if I were loving this movie, I think the main reason it would have been the creativity. I think there's some really creative ways that Gunn is choosing to not only shoot, but choosing to use the characters, use the powers. You can tell he writing group, whatever, actors, sat down together and were like, okay, this is who this character is, in those back pages, like you mentioned, of DC, haven't had a lot of spotlight villains. How can we use that in a way that's interesting and engaging? And pretty much down the line, he does. Every character in this movie is has random powers, strange powers, whatever they might be. There was a lot of thought given to how those powers would play out in what situations and what they would look like. So yeah, I think there's I totally get why I'm in the minority on this. Like, it's one of those movies where it's almost like I have some regrettable news. I didn't love this movie that you all love, and I understand why you love it. Like, it's one of those things where I feel terrible. It's just like, I have my own perspective. I have my own stuff, and we'll get into that, at some point. But I don't want to shut the love fest down because I know I'm in the minority, for one, and I know people are really loving this movie, and I don't want to, harsh that for others, right? Like, I don't want to be feel like it's my job to tell everybody why this movie you love is not great. Like, that's not
hey,
my
you're
goal,
wrong.
Yeah. But that's a very natural human tendency, right? Like, there's this human tendency, and I think you see it in toxic fan culture and wherever, where
I think you
when
just mean fan culture.
Fair enough. I do think there's there's some distinguishing features between fan culture and toxic
Those
fan
lines
culture,
are blurring.
They do blur, especially with social media and the internet. Social media and the internet brings out what I'm about to talk about, which is this human instinct to want people to hear your perspective and understand it the way you understand it. It's just normal human behavior. So when everybody's going, this movie is great, and you're like, but I didn't like it. Like, there's this real instinct to be like, you're all wrong, pay attention to this. And I don't want to do that because I love it when people love stuff. And so I'm excited that you guys do. So having said that, any other things you want to talk about that you really enjoyed about the film?
I want to talk about John Cena real quick because I know, Aaron, you have had a love-hate relationship with John Cena over the years.
It's mostly, I'll clarify this. It's not love-hate as much as it is, I don't think his skill set is where he wants it to be. And what I mean by that is I think he is very, very good in very particular places, like this one. This is perfect for him. And I think he wants to do more than this, and that's great. Go for it. Do it. Live your dream. But I think this is where he is going to be the best used in something like this, where it can really take advantage of kind of that, clueless persona that he puts on. Like, it's really fun and really interesting. So So I think he's perfect for this character, or at least plays it perfectly, in my opinion.
Well, something I wanted to touch on is that I think the chemistry between the characters, like if you want to talk improvements on the first, I feel the chemistry was so much more there than it was in the first one. But not only that, like in my opinion, it's a much more believable development of their camaraderie. Because I feel like because the first one just kind of takes place and then all of a sudden they like love each other and you're just like, but like literally 20 minutes ago you hated each other, and this has all taken place in almost just one night. Well, this one, there are moments that it allows the characters moments to actually develop themselves and develop each other in terms of relationships and the way they work, and making it believable that they are a team or enough of a team at the end for when there is the big climax. And so I was more on board with this group and the way that they work together than I was in the first one, which also allowed for all the comedy moments. Like, speaking of John Cena, like I really enjoyed I don't know if it's repartee because it's not maybe the characters, but I enjoyed the back and forth between Idris Elba's character and John Cena's character throughout the movie about like, especially there's one scene in particular that I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about when they're, let's say, showing off for each other.
It's my favorite part of the movie.
It's just such a fun moment, and you're just like, I believe that they would do that, and then it also allows for when there aren't conflicts between the characters later on, you can like, I understand it because I feel the same way. And so that's what I enjoy, and that's what I think also James Gunn does well, is that he's good at creating a bond between characters. So that's definitely something I wanted to touch on.
Yeah.
There's
Are we
one
ready?
thing. No.
Okay, not yet. Okay.
I want to talk about Sylvester Stallone's portrayal of King Shark because I think it's
I didn't even know it was him until afterwards. I was
it's kind of that Vin Diesel Groot thing, right? Where you're like, oh yeah.
But there's more of a personality to King Shark than Groot that you can really.
No,
access.
I just mean where you don't realize.
But
who
I know what you're
the
saying.
actor is.
Like, oh, that's Vin Diesel. Oh, that's Sylvester Stallone. Oh my gosh. He's so funny. He's so funny and so adorable too.
Yeah, you wouldn't think so. But
yeah, there's been a lot of iterations of King Shark over the years, and his personality. Actually, there's even a version of King Shark where he's like a Groot in a way, where Groot says, "I am Groot." There's a version of King Shark where all he says is, "King Shark is a shark." That's all he says. And then there's like the Flash where, he's like a fully sentient, speaking, I think this might be the best iteration of King Shark I've ever seen. I think that this adorable creature who wants to, fit in really badly, but if he needs to, he can turn on a switch and become Bruce from Jaws, he can turn into this horrifying killing machine. But at the same time, I think that he has the most emotion without having the least character development, because they don't really. All they say is, "Hey, he's a big shark man." That's all that is. There's not like a character, or he's just big shark man. You don't need much more than that. Yeah, I
feel like that's a lot of the characters. Like they don't really, and I think also just the plot in general. Like they don't really spend a lot of time explaining you the reasoning behind it. It's just like, this is what's happening. Go with it or don't go with it. That's your choice.
Yeah.
So
Gunn is really good at that efficiency, right? He's really good at character building efficiency, where he understands what the audience needs to know, what they don't need to know. What's important for the audience to be into what he's presenting and not. So he understands that stuff really, really well. So
the last thing I want to talk about before Aaron can unload on his feelings for this movie.
It's not much of an unloading.
No, I know. I'm just giving you a hard time. But something that Gunn, I don't know if Gunn wrote this or if did he write this? He did write this. He did. Something that Gunn understood that David Ayer didn't in the other Suicide Squad movie is...
Well, let's just be clear. Ayer has made it very clear that the movie that came out was not something that who didn't understand what is probably up for grabs, but at least that movie didn't understand it. Yeah.
Okay, fine. But let's just go with hypothetically something
Mhm.
that James Gunn understood that David Ayer's movie didn't portray, let's say,
Right.
is
Sure.
what makes the Suicide Squad work. Because if you think about it on a level of like a comic book fan, you have seen each of these characters be the antagonist to all of your favorite heroes ever. How do I get my audience to root for the villains now?
Mhm.
Simple. You need to have another antagonistic element to this movie that really shows you, oh, so this is what true evil could be. And that's Amanda Waller, because she represents not only evil, she represents the establishment. And something that all of these characters that you will ever see in the Suicide Squad have that she doesn't is a personality or emotion. You know, they feel, you know, their version of emotions and feelings might be twisted and definitely not the norm. But Amanda Waller is cold and heartless and ruthless. And that is something I think is even more terrifying than like a Joker or a Scarecrow or a Bizarro or a Lex Luthor, you know, because each of
Mhm.
those characters has a motivation and a goal. They have ambition, or they feel, you know, they get angry and stuff. Amanda Waller is kind of like a shell, and that's way eerier and creepier. And I think that James
Mm.
Gunn's version of the Suicide Squad, if you want to call it that, really understood what Amanda Waller needed to be. And you see that not only in her, but the people she works with, how they react to her. They're like, oh, okay, she is not what I thought she was. She is horrifying. And I
Mhm.
think that that is really great because it allows you to care and root and hope that the Suicide Squad makes it out, because you're like, oh, you got to get Waller. Oh, you got to get Waller. She's horrible. Yeah, and then you can
Yeah,
go back
well,
to fighting Batman.
Yeah, but I think it's also that like she's very, you know, going off what you said, very one-dimensional, but that's what she needs to be. While the others, while they are villains, like there is, I mean, maybe
Exactly.
not good reasons, but there's reasons for it. They have dimension behind them. They're complex characters. While she doesn't have motivation, she is just like she doesn't really care if what she's doing is for the good or for the bad. It's just in the interest of the government which she serves. That's entirely it, and that's the point. She says, well, all the characters, like, yeah, sure, maybe, you know, this is in the trailer, so it's not a spoiler, but like when Idris Elba's character, he put Superman in the ICU with a kryptonite bullet, but it's like, you know, he also was horrifically sort of tortured growing up by his father, and like you understand why someone would become like that, and he has dimension to his character. It makes you root for him because humanity is like that. People aren't black and white, you know. While Amanda Waller is almost entirely black, you could say, in terms of her character's motivations, the good guys in this, or even in reality, good guys aren't just good guys. No one's entirely, you know, a white knight. They're just people trying to do what they think is right, trying to do what they think will serve them in the best way. And that's why these characters work well, because they do replicate kind of what we as humans feel. And that is just like going along with all the ickiness of your past, all the stuff that's happened to you, and having to try and just push forward and do something that will make your life better in whatever way that is. Which is why I think it's also really great. Also want to touch on that I also think James Gunn does the cute character really well, because Sebastian the rat is the cutest thing in the world, and I want one. And it's like Ratatouille for the modern age, because it once again shows rats can be adorable.
Yeah, it really is kind of a Ratatouille thing going on with that character for sure, in many ways. Well, I suppose it's about time. So I've been thinking a lot over the last couple of days of why I didn't enjoy this movie, why I had a bad experience, all those kind of things. At first, I thought it was my typical thing. I thought it was my typical, who do I root for? What am I attached to? Why do I care? I don't think that's exactly it. I think there are choices made that play into that tendency of mine. But I don't think that's exactly it, because like you said, there is an effort here to give you something to root for, humanize these characters in some way. Alice, I think you said it very well. Although it's not for all of them, it's really for 3 of them. I think there's 3 of them that they do a good job with. If you want to count King Shark just because he's adorable, you can. But the movie doesn't really do much, on that account. He's dumb and adorable, so we give him a pass, maybe. But there are 3 characters that the movie takes, I think, great pains to go, okay, there's a reason they're like this, and what they're doing is the greater good than what Waller wants them to do, at least by the end. No spoilers. And so I don't think it's completely that. I think what it comes down to is, I think James Gunn's tendencies need to be reined in. I think that this movie suffers, actually, from letting him completely go all out. And when I say that, I mean specifically in the gleeful, grotesque violence. It's not just that it's violent.
All right,
it's
Grandma.
Excited to be violent. No, that's fine. I totally get this. No, listen, this is tough for me because I totally understand what you're saying, but there are few things that bother me more than the idea of playing to human nature and the idea that the answer is blowing someone's face off. That is, I know this is a comedy. I totally get all that stuff. But at the end of the day, it's one of those things that doesn't sit right with me. And so there's this element of, why? Why does it need that? Why does it need the grotesqueness? Why can't it just have the consequences, be that, lives are ending? And the answer is this: because it impacts us. The answer is because it does something to us. And what this movie says it does is it gets us going. Like, that's exciting. That's cool. Oh, did you see what that face did? Like, there's this real, I don't know. It picks at me. It's just like this thing that's like, man, that's playing to like our worst tendencies, like our worst natures. I
think it also serves the purpose of immediately letting you know that these guys are bad guys, right? A superhero
this is what I'm
not
saying.
blow someone's face off. You'd hope they wouldn't. But
this is what I'm saying, though.
Yeah, they won't care. And that's like why they exist, is because they don't care. They get the job done. They'll, chop your skull off if that's what needs to be done.
And this is what I'm saying plays into the idea of who do I root for. So everything you do with the Storm Reed character, the daughter character, all that stuff is so hollow to me, because the rest of the movie has been about being gleeful about, violent. Like, it just, to me, if you rein that in just a little bit, because there's a real thing that happens with humans.
Does the same thing. And
I hate it when Tarantino does it too. Like, this is not news, right? Like, my favorite Tarantino movie is the one that, has a lot of positivity throughout it. Yes, it has some violence, in the final confrontation or whatever.
Okay, but what's your second favorite Tarantino movie? It's Inglourious Bastards. It's Inglourious Bastards, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Which is right on the same level as this, as far as,
except in both of those movies, you have very clear, this is why the violence is supposed to be satisfying to you, because I'm changing history and I'm having the actual bad guys, be destroyed, as opposed to both of those movies are revisionist history movies. This is a movie about villains, who are trying to, trying to root for. This is
technically revisionist history. every movie is revisionist history if you try hard enough.
I know I am probably, well, this is a loaded word. I'm going to say it this way. You don't need to correct me. I get it. I know I'm wrong on this. Like, I get that I'm let's just say in the minority on this or whatever. But that doesn't change that it's how I experience it, right? Like, it doesn't change that. Where I wanted to go with it is, I think there is something we can do with storytelling. And boy, I did not expect emotion right here. I apologize. There's something we can do with storytelling that brings out the best in people. Like, there's an empathy, right? Like, there's a thing that Roger Ebert said that I always go back to, that is, films are a machine for empathy, right? They're this miraculous machine where we get to experience other lives, and there are real ways to do that, right? And then there are ways to take the human experience and pervert it, right? There are ways to take the human experience and go, these worst parts of us, let's just have fun with that, right? You know, and there's, I don't know if I would call it like gornography, you know, like the idea of like taking gore to the place where it's like so extreme and over the top because it's titillating, right? And I just, for me, if you dial that back to a place, and I'm not trying to be, you know, killjoy, you know, uptight guy, whatever. Like, you know, there are certainly very violent movies that I love. You're not wrong, Andrew. There are very violent movies that I love. It's just in a situation like this, if it could just be dialed back just a tad, like, you know, put the reins on just a little bit, you can still have the same experience just without playing to the joy of destruction of like humans' bodies and blood and bone. And I don't know, there's something off-putting about it for me. And I do apologize for the emotion. I wasn't planning. I thought
How am I
maybe
supposed
I'd
to
get
make fun of you now?
No,
Gosh.
you can't.
I was like,
You
I was
totally
going to
can.
rebut, and now I can't.
You can. You can make fun of me. You can rebut. All that is fair play. Just because my emotions did something doesn't take that off the table. And again, I know I'm in the minority on this, but there is this thing sometimes when I'm watching movies like this that seem to revel in the gore that I just go, man, that's just hard for me. And in turn, it affects the way I see the rest of the movie. So yes, go ahead. Make fun, rebut, you know,
No.
I'm good.
Yeah. I'll say this. And I know we're really getting to deep emotional stuff here.
No, you're
But-
good. I'm past it, he says as he
No, but
starts to cry
I'm
again.
going there now. I'm going there now.
Okay.
So, having seen this movie, it doesn't affect me from the way real stuff does, because I saw something.
Because it's not real. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll just say I saw something recently that was real, and it was on kind of like the same level as like what you see here, you know, in this movie. That reality of what I saw a little bit ago impacted me so much and left a mark on me. But for some reason, whenever I see movies like this, you know, where, you know, for some people it would be like a PTSD, like a callback to like a traumatic thing.
Mhm.
For me, it doesn't hit me on the same level because I know that there's a separation from reality.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, but
And
I
I've heard
understand
some-
what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, that, you know, the glorification and the ability to take joy from seeing stuff like this is probably not healthy.
That's it. That's it. I mean, that's it. And I totally understand what you're saying. And for some, I've heard others who have talked about being able to produce or view or watch or interact with entertainment like this is a healthy way for them. They feel like is a healthy way for them to process real life things they've said and say, okay, I can have a context for this that exists in a world where it doesn't have consequences, right? So yeah, I totally get that there are always different perspectives to these things. What I'm trying to do is two things. Number one, try to communicate as well as I can my experience with the film. And also, if somebody else is built like me, communicate to them, you may have this experience with the film.
Yeah.
That's it. And as said before, I don't want to steal anybody's joy about a movie that they love. And if you're able to compartmentalize and do those things, I totally get it. I'm sure I have those things where I look at something on the screen that, you know, probably doesn't speak to a healthy place in me, but I'm having a good time with it or whatever. Like, I get that that's a normal human thing. You know, just trying to do my best to communicate my thoughts through that. So all of that is one thing that impacts my overall view of the big thing. And so that's probably why I come down and then didn't like it.
I need to, just in case some people are wondering, because we spent a lot of time on it. Yes, this movie's gory. It's not the goriest movie ever made by any stretch. You know,
Eli Roth exists.
Yeah, Eli Roth. You stole my bit again.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, you still, but yeah, I just want to make sure people understand. Oh, because I don't want people to go, oh, is this movie really that gory? It's bloody for sure. It's not the goriest movie ever made.
If you're taking what I said to be less gore because I hate gore, you're not quite. I'm not quite communicating as well as I should be. It's not the gore that I'm trying to talk about. I'm trying to talk the gore's connection to excitement, to glee,
the human condition,
to humor, that's what I'm talking about. That connection that bothers me. The gore itself, gore can be used really well in movies. And Andrew's not wrong. This isn't the goriest movie ever. It just seems to revel in it in a way that I've said the same thing about Goodfellas. I think Goodfellas has some of this too. You know, like there's a reveling in the violence that is off-putting to me. So yeah. Any last things or other things?
I'd say that for me, like just to give where I kind of stand on this, because I have this very sort of I don't know, it's not an opinion, but a sensibility where, like, for example, there is some anime that my partner watches. For example, there's this anime Berserk, which is just I walked in. Andrew's nodding. He knows what I'm talking about. There's the last few episodes, like, you want to know violence and gore, and like that is just, it's horrifying. Like, I walked in on him watching it once, and I saw one of the scenes, and it is all the trigger words, like all the triggers are in that, and that's drawn. And I think that hits me more because it's like someone took the time to draw all this and animate it. And I don't know why that one really affects me. Like, I can't sit down and watch it because it's almost too much. I think it's because of the way the story is and the way that it's done. But in this case, the reason why I'm okay with it is, and why, like, I'll admit it, why I do enjoy it. Well, I do have fun when someone gets their face blown off and I'm like, oh, yeah, you're a bad guy, you know? Because there is an element of, like, I can separate, like, I know that that's just an actor and they're fine and they're probably home with their family right now, you know, eating some soup. But also there's an element of escapism.
Did you have to use soup? Did you have to use soup? Couldn't have gone with a hamburger? No, hamburger's bad too.
Eating a grilled cheese.
There you go. That works. That works.
I want a grilled cheese now.
Yeah, it's too early for a grilled cheese. 7:30 in the morning for me.
Never too early.
But then there's an element of escapism to the whole thing where it's like, I hope I will never experience something like this in real life. You know, I will never be in a situation where I'm going to have to, you know, set someone on fire and watch them die and hear their screams. But this is as close to experiencing it at such a high level of reality. Like, everything about it is so fake. Like, the fact that it's set in a superhero-ish world, you know, people don't have powers. People like Harley Quinn, if you fell in a vat of chemicals, you'd die. You wouldn't become an insane, you know, assassin. And so there's an element of escapism to it, which is why I love the movies, is this element of escapism and discovering new worlds and living in new worlds with new characters that allows me that, you know, not glee, but the enjoyment of seeing this version of human or character that I can't experience in my own world. And so that's why I find it so enticing for this particular type of movie.
Yeah, there's I forget who said it, but it was in a like a national study of pornography or something like that, and the person was asked, well, how do you know it's pornography? And the person says, well, you just know it when you see it. You know, like, how do you know how do you know where that line is? And I think for each of us, you know, we kind of have to figure that out. I would say, you know, you look at sex versus violence and how it's portrayed on screen and how sexless movies are. And there's certainly lots of commentary online about this and different things are. And I think it's a fear of going too far with sexually explicit stuff, right? Like, please don't, but also I'm trying to make my point here. But like the sexually explicit version of this movie, as violently explicit as it is, like, you know, like there are reasons we have lines just for, you know, living in a society and that kind of thing. And so just trying to figure out where those are. It's just interesting that violence is just one, at least in content, that there really are no limits, right? Like, there are no lines with what you can do in violence in movies, really. So yeah, I don't know. I find, if nothing else, I find it fascinating, right? Like, if nothing else, it's an interesting like thought, process for me to kind of work through that stuff and try to figure out, how, both sex and violence are very natural human parts of who we are. How do we process those? How do we process those through story? What does that look like? How do we use fiction where it's safe to help us process reality where it can be dangerous? Like all that kind of stuff is I think valuable conversation. And again, I could really totally be completely in the wrong and just have been, in a weird headspace and so it didn't work for me. But I listen, I totally get why people love this movie. I really do.
On the sex point, that's a weird way to start my sentence.
Great transition.
No, on that point, like I actually have to say, as a quick sort of positive within the negatives, I appreciate how the female characters were portrayed in this so much more than how they were portrayed in the first one. Because there isn't that group, I kind of, and you can tell me if I'm completely off base with this, but I often feel that the difference as well with like how much sort of sex stuff you show versus violent stuff, a lot of it also has to do with, I tend to find that sexual, like when you go explicit in the sexual nature, it is often at the expense of the female character, while violence is just kind of like, anyone could get hit by that, like it's not necessarily as gendered as a sexual thing can be. And this one really just kind of is like, it has female characters, it has male characters, but that's not an integral part of it. That's not like they're not, for example, the women aren't shot differently to the men, which I appreciate because that's something that always frustrates me because, someone can be badass. It doesn't really matter, like whether they have an XY chromosome or not. So that's something I will say, I think it improved as well a lot on the first one.
Yeah, I think the male gaze is in film is shifting, and I really do appreciate it. I'm not saying it's absent by any stretch of the imagination, but I do see the same thing you do, which is that it is, I said the same thing about, Wonder Woman in, the different movies. You can just see the different ways that she's shot. Same character, same actress, and, it's real. It's something that's real, and it's worth talking about. So, I think that's good. Unless Andrew, you wanted to talk about the post-credit scene.
I was gonna say there's a mid-credit scene and a post-credit scene. So
there is, both things do exist.
Also, real quick, in terms of something else, I think the title is stupid. I don't like the title of this movie.
You don't like the word "the"?
No, it's not even that. It's just I don't think it's enough of a differentiator so that when I'm talking about it, I have to be like, oh no, like the new one. So there's like Suicide Squad. First of all, I didn't even realize that the first one was called just Suicide Squad. I thought it was just the Suicide Squad. But it's like when I'm talking about it, I have to then clarify. I'm gonna have to clarify every time now. Like, no, not yeah, this like because a normal person's not going to be able to understand that they're stupid, but it's just like they're not going to know. And so they're going to be like, wait, like the one with, the fire guy. And it's just like, no, the new one where like, everyone's heads get blown off. And it's just like, it's like, how hard would it have been? And I read why they did that. And it's because, this is part of how James Gunn was like, oh, it's not a sequel, it's a reboot. So therefore it can't be Suicide Squad 2 because it's not a sequel. And so I'm just like, but everyone's just going to call it Suicide Squad 2 anyway. Yeah. I came up with a title that I personally think would have been better.
Tell us.
I think it should have been called Suicide Squad Clean Slate.
There you go.
Because
I like it.
Of certain elements in the movie that if we do spoilers, I can talk about it.
No,
but
that's great.
Like,
that works on like 3 levels. That's a great title. Yeah.
Thank you.
I like that.
I wanted to share that.
It shall forevermore on this podcast be known as Suicide Squad Clean Slate.
You gotta have that.
We will call it. Gotta have
colons abound.
Yes, you do. Yes, indeed. All right, let's move on to the next review. Let's talk a little bit about Vivo. Vivo, just as explicitly violent as the Suicide Squad, follows a one-of-a-kind kinkajou, a.k.a. Rainforest Honey Bear, who spends his days playing music to the crowds in a lively square with his beloved owner, Andres. Though they may not speak the same language, Vivo and Andres are the perfect duo through their common love of music. But Vivo will need the help of Gabby, an energetic tween who bounces to the beat of her own offbeat drum to fulfill his destiny. Vivo is not completely written by Lin-Manuel Miranda, although you probably will hear his impact in the music very profoundly. He did write the music in this. He also is the voice of Vivo. You've got Zoe Saldana in there as well. Gloria Stefan coming in as Marta, and some other names you might know, including Michael Rooker.
What?
And Brian Tyree Henry also in this for a little bit too. I'm curious, what do you guys think of Vivo? Did you like it, love it, dislike it, hate it, or it was just okay? Andrew, start us off.
I'm gonna go with high side of just okay. Maybe low side of liked it. I could probably be convinced to go low side of liked it.
What about you, Alice?
I would say, yeah, I liked it, but definitely in the bottom half of liked it.
Okay, low side of liked it. Yeah, I'm probably right in the middle of liked it. There are a lot of I think probably I like it the most of the three of us, if I'm hearing you guys correctly, because there's a lot about this movie that I do love. Like there are moments the music kicks in and I'm just like, I could listen to Lin-Manuel write songs forever. Like the way he understands rhyme scheme and wordplay, and I love it when a song I can revel on multiple levels. Like I could listen to the music and go, oh, I'm enjoying this music. And then I start listening to the lyrics and I'm like, oh, that was really smart. Oh, that was clever. He's a really good wordsmith. And so yeah, there are those moments in this movie where I was thinking, oh, I love this movie. And then there are moments in this movie where I was like, okay, well, let's just move it along. Like it is a movie for me that I do come down on the side of liked it, because at the end of the day, I like the overall plot. I like what the message is saying. I like where we go. I like some of the characters, even if it's a little clunky in the execution at times. So I had a really good time. What about you guys? Alice, you want to go next?
Yeah, I think in terms of what I liked, the art style is very unique and it's really bright and it's really colorful, and I really enjoyed that. Like I enjoyed the lights and the brightness and the vivacity to it all. Vivo vivacity. There you go.
There you go.
I don't even know if that's a word, but so I like that.
It is.
I do
it
like
comes
music.
it comes from the Latin root for life. Viva means life. So
there you go.
There you go.
Long
I'm
live
so
Las
smart,
Vegas.
I didn't
Viva
even know.
Las Vegas.
Oh yeah, of
Las
course.
Vegas.
But yeah, I like that. I some of the music took me a second to get into. Like there's the main the little girl's song that she starts. At first I was like, okay. But then as
I
it
want to
went
talk
on,
about
I really
that
got
song.
into it.
I had
Yeah,
the
'cause,
same experience.
Yeah. So I was just like, at first I was like, oh, okay, this is stupid. But then as it went on and more things got integrated within it, I was like, oh, I'm enjoying this. All right, I'm having a good time. Which is I feel. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say about that song, since we're on that song. I had the experience where it was like, oh, this is different. I'm not sure I like this. Oh, this is kind of cool. Oh, this is fun. And then by the time they play it over the end credits, I was like, oh, this is my jam.
Yeah.
It was kind of one of those songs. Like it happened that quickly for me. Anyhow, continue.
I think part of what initially had me holding back on that song was the fact that they rhymed drum with drum, and I was just like, well, that's lazy. But yeah, it was just like I really enjoyed that, and so that's actually the experience I had with a lot of the music. At first, I'm like, oh yeah, and then I got into it. Which is kind of also just how I feel about a lot of this movie. Like, I don't want to jump into negatives really quickly before we go into anything, but there's a lot. I feel like this movie just felt like it was missing something in a lot of it. Like, it was just missing that je ne sais quoi, that magic that you can get in. While I enjoyed this movie, I think that there's better versions of it that exist. For example, obviously there's Coco and Book of Life, which are more easily, I would say, relevant to this movie. But then also Over the Moon, I would say, is a very similar sort of thematic movie, and the way that it tells the story and the way that it plays out. But I think it's better. And so I just feel like there was something missing that I couldn't get fully into it. So yeah.
Yeah. Andrew, what about you?
I hate talking about the music, actually, I find it interesting because comparative to a lot of the other Lin-Manuel stuff that's come out recently, which a lot more has come out recently, mainstream, as opposed to just Broadway and stuff like that. I didn't feel the magic in any of the songs as I did in most of the others, besides the song at the very end, not the one over the credits, but the very last one that's sung.
For Marta.
Yeah, for Marta.
Marta.
Yeah. That I thought was very beautiful because of the multiple meanings that song has. Also, something that section of the movie does great is it changes animation style for a little bit, which I thought was great. It worked really well for me. I'm like, oh, this movie could have worked in either one of these animation styles. And it just made me realize, you know what? Sony, if they really put their mind to it, could be the next Pixar. I mean, we already have Into the Spider-Verse, and now we have this. Like, they got some tricks up their sleeve that
and the Mitchells versus the Machines, wasn't that Sony or am I?
Was that Sony too?
Yeah.
Oh, well,
I
or
think
maybe
so.
not.
I know it came out on Netflix, but so did this. So yeah.
So
Sony's got some. I mean, I loved Mitchell versus the Machines. I thought the movie was hilarious.
Me too.
Yeah. So yeah, Pixar, they better be worried that there's a new big dog in town that might, if they play their cards right, could be a contender. DreamWorks certainly isn't anymore.
No, and it's interesting though, because Sony does kind of have their own little feel to their movies, right? Like Lord and Miller have contributed a lot to that. You mentioned Mitchell's versus the Machine, which is Lord and Miller production. Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, was that Sony as well? I believe it was. I could be wrong about that.
Yeah.
Anyhow, my point is, they continue that here because yes, there is a Pixar-ish element to the story here. I actually thought this story was one of the... You could have shown me this movie and gone, Pixar made this, and I would have gone, yeah, I can see that. The story is like their pattern, their strategy with, how it uses characters, how it uses emotion, how it sets up emotion and story and those kind of things. And believe me, you should know this, coming from me, that's a huge compliment. Because I love Pixar so much, but they've also got that sense. They've got their own quirky little sense of humor that's a little different from Pixar's sense of humor. It's a little more fast paced, a little more modern edged in many ways, and yeah, I think that's here as well. But yeah, I think for me, I think you're right. I think it's beautiful. I think you're right about. There's a different version of this movie that could have been so much better if it understood a little bit more of how to get its characters from point A to point B where they wanted to be. Because the most unfortunate thing about the movie for me, I'll just say this, is it sets up a really powerful emotional moment. Like a really powerful moment without spoiling anything. It sets it up really well. And it just doesn't quite pay it off as well as it should. Like that moment should have been so good, and it was only good. You know what I mean? Like it was good, but it should have been like goosebumps, and because it's all right there. Like the bones of that are just right there, and it doesn't quite do what it takes to pay it off in a really powerful way.
The best way I can describe it is that it made me cry, but it didn't make me sob. Like that's
Sure.
Like I was ready, and I cried, but I remember how I felt. Like again, and I hate to compare it. This is like with Suicide Squad, where it's like I hate to compare it to the MCU, but
listen, it's what we do. It's fine. Yeah,
I hate to compare it to Pixar, but like there are moments like in Coco or Inside Out where I couldn't stop crying. Like I was just like, this is embarrassing. You're in public, Alice. What are you doing?
I'm right there with you.
I was like, I was tearing up, and I a few tears shed, but it was, I 100% agree with what you're saying, where it's like, it didn't hit, like it could have been amazing, and instead it was just good. And it just, as a result, you're just like it. And I think part of it comes from the fact that it didn't allow itself to live in its moments. Because it's because Sony Pictures, like you said, has this very fast-paced sort of style, and so as a result, it just kind of moves on. And you're just like, if you just let yourself live in the moments, live in the character moments, this could have been something really special.
And I think where it feels it the most for me is it could have been a really nice 1-2 switcheroo with the emotion, where the emotion one of the plot emotions that's coming. But I think they're trying to do something. I'm trying not to be spoilery, but there's some emotion coming with Marta and what's going to happen there. But what you don't realize as much is the emotional moment that could come between Gabby and Vivo, right? Like there's a thing. I think the movie does this really, really well as far as Pixar is concerned. Is Onward. Right? Like Onward has this thing where there's a dad thing coming, but you don't realize the brother thing's coming, and it just like woof, right? Like this could have figured out how to do that. It just didn't. And so the Gabby Vivo stuff almost feels shallow. Like it doesn't feel invested in enough to really get kind of that little emotional turn that could have happened there. Yeah. So yeah almost.
Yeah, this movie misses that magical thing for me that is going to make it memorable.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't see myself like, oh, do you guys remember Vivo or anything like that? Honestly, in a year from now, somebody would be like, have you seen Vivo? I'm like, you mean the YouTube, music video thing? And that's going to be where my mind goes whenever somebody says Vivo.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. Yeah, anything else? One last thing? Anything else about Vivo before
no
we kinda
post-credit
move on?
scene.
Yeah.
Nope. I would say that, like, I don't know if this is a negative, but it's very predictable. Like, as the movie started, in the first 5 minutes, I knew exactly what was going to happen and how it was going to happen, and that's how it played out. But, like, that's not the biggest problem in the world because, it's like what you're getting into. But this is like a fun family movie. It's fine if you need to entertain your kid for an afternoon. Chuck it on. It's not going to hurt anyone. But there's just so much. I would recommend before you press play on this one, like I said, Coco, Book of Life, Over the Moon, better versions of this movie.
The thing that those movies have that this one doesn't is the supporting cast always delivers in those movies. Like, I think that in this one, the Girl Scouts or whatever they're called have a couple lines that I think are hilarious. But as like, I don't know, like the movie doesn't live with its supporting characters long enough for me to like care about them. It moves on to a different set of people, and I'm like, oh, so I'm supposed to care. Oh, they're gone. Okay, fine. Well, I was gonna try and care about them, but I guess not. So yeah, it doesn't really, dig its heels in the ground and say, nope, this is who we're sticking with. This group of supporting characters, you're gonna love them, enjoy it. So.
I appreciated a couple things about some of the periphery storylines in those periphery characters, but you're right. The movie doesn't invest in them in any way that has any impact when those things happen. You think of I'm just gonna say the Lovebirds, right? Like that kind of side story.
It's just a moment. It's
just a moment, and and I think if it had spoken to something deeper, something more thematic, and given the time to relate it to that, maybe there's something there. I did like how I'm just gonna say the mini Karen part of the the
Girl Scouts
team, the Girl Scout cookie team.
That was hilarious.
It was really funny, and I also appreciated that it wasn't the resolution for that wasn't typical, antagonist kind of resolution, but still, even as I appreciated that turn, the movie doesn't earn it. Like the movie doesn't get us there in any satisfying way. It just kind of flips a switch.
It's way too quick.
Yeah, it just kind of flips a switch.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
so
it.
I'm not a bad
I feel like
man.
they were just like, oh, we got to get him to Miami. Let's just, it's fine. We'll move on.
And that I think sums up a lot of the issues we have with this movie, it sounds like, is that there's a lot of great ideas and it just needed another, year in the cooker. It just needed a little more of that story work that really nails down how everything relates and how the characters, get through. So, yeah.
There's a lot of Lassie acting in this one, like where we'll hear what Vivo is saying, but then the humans in this movie, they just hear the Pikachu just go,
oh, yeah.
and they're like, what is it, Vivo? Is Timmy in a well? And they understand exactly what he's trying to say, but
Yeah.
Well, that
Yeah.
also got me wondering where it's like there's so many moments where Vivo's singing with humans, and I'm just like, what
Yeah.
are they hear?
Yeah.
Yeah, they just gotta
Right, yeah.
and this is actually another thing I really quickly wanted to touch on is that I feel like the movie is really changing about how it sits in reality, where it's like at some points it's obviously not real, but then in other moments it decides to take the real, like what would actually happen, like with let's say the drawbridge moment. Like that was very much like, oh well, this is what would actually happen, but then you have the whole bit in the national park where you're just like, okay, yep, that's never gonna happen. So you just like pick a lane. Like
Yeah.
Yeah, have some consistency. Totally agree. Well, there you go. That is Vivo on Netflix and The Suicide Squad on HBO Max and in theaters. Before we head on to our best ever challenge, want to thank our SIF Pop members for making this possible. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Your brand new members only bonus show is in your podcast feed. We talked about the state of DC filmmaking right now. So in fact, I think we talked like 20 minutes about like different ways that DC could do things and make things more fun. So if you're interested in that, or you just want to support what goes on here, either way, go check out the Patreon, patreon.com/siftpop, SIFTPOP. And you can check out the different levels there. There's a monthly hangout at a certain level. You've got the bonus podcasts at a certain level, all sorts of fun stuff. And, beyond everything else, just thank you for even considering it. It's at patreon.com/siftpop. All right, let's move on to the best ever challenge. As mentioned, Michael Rooker in both of these movies, in about the same amount of a role in both of these movies. So let's take a look at best ever Michael Rooker movies. Number 5 to number 1, and maybe some honorable mentions at the end. If anybody has one. Nope, not me either.
I can tell you already, I've definitely cheated on this already. So.
You cheated. I see. Fun stuff. I got into this one too, and I was like, oh, I thought I liked more movies of his than I apparently do. He's been in a lot of stuff. I just haven't seen
a lot of TV.
and I haven't seen a lot of the B movies and stuff that he's been in, and so this was interesting.
Well, let me just say that before yesterday, I'd only seen 3 movies he'd ever been in. So
nice.
And so I watched 2 last night so that I had 5 to talk about.
This is one of my favorite things, though, honestly, is I love the best ever challenge is it does inspire me to watch movies that I need, like either catch up on movies I haven't seen in a long time, like I did with this one. I watched a couple that I hadn't seen in a while. And just to kind of clarify my thoughts on them, or watch new ones that I haven't. When we did the Denzel list, like I watched 6 or 7 Denzel movies that week, and I was like, it's really interesting to watch somebody's filmography like back to back to back, and just kind of get a sense for them as an actor. So anyhow, I only managed to pick out 5. I was afraid I was going to have to put a bad movie on my top 5, but I don't think I did. I don't think I had to. Well, there may be one that a lot of people think is bad, but I love it. So
it's funny because like I have one movie, my number 5, where I'm like, it's an okay movie. The other 4 I love. Yeah, it's crazy. Sure. So that's how it works, I guess.
All right, let's see. I guess I usually start this, and I can do that as well. I have 8 Men Out at number 5. This is a really good movie. This is one you should check out if you hadn't. Obviously, it's about the baseball scandal, and was
it the Cubs or the Yankees?
I think it was the White Sox.
You're right. It was the Chicago White Sox. Yeah.
I think it was the White Sox. But you've got like Charlie Sheen in here.
For those of us who don't know baseball, what's the scandal?
You want to explain it, Aaron?
I can try. It shouldn't be that hard. It's just it's the idea of shaving points, the idea of like working, taking a dive, working with gamblers to make sure the result goes in their favor, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Taking a dive is a boxing term, but it's the same idea for these cricketers.
I think it's kind of universal now,
Yeah. Anyhow, John Cusack, Charlie Sheen, D.B. Sweeney, Christopher Lloyd, David Strathairn. It's got quite a cast, and it's really well told and well done. A lot of good emotion in it. So definitely one to check out. That comes in at my number 5.
Yeah, I saw the 30 for 30 on this, but I never saw this movie.
You should check it out. You should definitely check it out.
Cool.
All right, Andrew, what's your number 5?
This is where I have, speaking of Denzel, Bone Collector.
Yeah. I haven't seen this recently enough to know if I think it's good or not. So
Me neither.
Seen it. I always saw it show up on TV, but I was too young to watch it whenever I did. So
I mean, it's a good enough like crime drama to where you won't be mad that you wasted your time watching it, but it's not gonna like, oh, this is thrilling. You know, you're invested enough to not be bored, which is the worst / best thing I guess I could say about it. You know, like, you have amazing people in this. You have Angelina Jolie and Denzel Washington. It's an interesting premise about a man who is paralyzed, and he was one of the greatest detectives of his time. And now he is using Angelina Jolie as this up-and-coming rookie detective, kind of as a surrogate. Like, he puts a camera on her, and he's watching the TV. He's like, now look over here and tell me what you see. He's like, so it's kind of like you have two sets of eyes on one body looking around to try and solve this serial killer's murder. It's interesting and it's good, but it's not like, whoa.
Welcome to the best ever challenge, where this week we mean the mediocrest ever challenge.
Pretty good.
For the pretty good ever challenge.
Hey, like I said, my 4 through 1 I love. So.
Yeah, no. I totally get it. You know, it's interesting with The Bone Collector. This was next on my list of Rooker movies to catch up on, and I just didn't get a chance to rewatch it. It was also missed the cutoff on the Denzel. It was like the next one on my Denzel list that I was going to watch. So I really feel like I owe this movie a rewatch.
If we ever do an Angelina Jolie list,
an Angelina Jolie list, it'll be the first one I watch. Like, I just it's had enough. All right. What about you, Alice?
So first I will say that because I watched the 2 movies that make up my 4 and 5 last night, when I made up this list, I immediately put them at 4 or 5. But I will say that one of them I would have put higher had I seen it ahead of time, but I'd never seen it before, so I didn't want to just assume. Sure. However, I still feel like this would still be my number 5, which is Super.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So basically I went through his filmography and I was like, what are movies that I might enjoy? And so I was considering, because the thing is, I also noticed that a lot of the movies on his filmography, on Michael Rooker's filmography, are movies that I was like, oh, I want to see it. And then the reviews came out and they were like, for example, Brightburn. And I was like, I'll watch something else instead. So Super, basically, if you like Kick-Ass, you'll probably like Super because they're very similar.
Speaking of gore.
This one's, I was going to say, you don't like gore. Aaron, don't watch this movie.
No, I've seen it.
All the trigger words, every trigger you could ever think of, from, violence to rape to weird tentacle stuff. It's just got everything. And I was watching it right before I went to bed and I was like, I'm gonna have some weird dreams tonight. And I did. But it's basically just Rainn Wilson, whose wife leaves him for a drug dealer and he decides to become a superhero to save her, but he's also low-key crazy. And then you've got Elliot Page as his sidekick, and they're just characters that are, you can tell that there's a screw loose in both of their heads, but you're kind of like, well, I guess to be a superhero, maybe you would have to have a few screws loose. So but yes, very gory, very violent, very horrific. Don't know if I'll ever watch it again, but if you like Kick-Ass, you'll probably like this one.
This came out the same year as a Woody Harrelson movie called Defendor, which I don't know if either of you guys have seen it or not.
I don't think so.
Never heard of it.
I don't think so.
Was leagues above this one. This one. Actually, if we were to ever do a best superhero or vigilante movie, not based like Marvel or DC or Image or any of the big comic books, because I don't think it's actually based. I could be wrong. It could be based on a comic book, but like watching that one, it hits so many interesting notes. Like toward the end of this movie, I actually got really emotional. So whenever like somebody mentions Super, I get excited. I'm like, "Ooh, are they talking about Defend?" Oh no, they're not. They're talking about the Rainn Wilson one. So like, I get it's like a quick roller coaster of like, oh. So that's why I didn't put it on my list. But yeah, it's violent.
Yeah,
Michael Rooker's in it. Aaron, if you think that James Gunn needed to be held back in Suicide Squad, this is a James Gunn movie as well, and he did not hold back. But it also has Nathan Fillion in it, so you know, I don't know.
There you go.
I don't know if that helps.
All right, let's move on to our number 4s.
Yeah.
My number 4 is JFK. I have at
Trump!
number 4. I figured you might.
Never seen
I figured
it.
you might. All right.
I wanted to, but I was like, it's 3 hours, and then I didn't watch it.
Yeah.
Andrew, what is your number 4?
Believe it or not, this is where I have Tombstone.
Okay, I'll go ahead and trump that. I'll return Trump fire on that one.
Yeah. Well, Aaron trumped a Western on me. What is going on?
What about you, Alice? What do you have at number 4?
This might get trumped. Mississippi Burning.
Yeah, I'm gonna trump you.
Yeah, this is the one that would definitely have been higher if I'd seen it before.
Yeah. I have either not seen this or not seen it in so long I don't remember it. So it's not on my list, but I should probably watch or rewatch it depending. So, but that's trumped. So I guess we're on to our number 3s.
Yep.
I'll be surprised if I'm trumped on this one. This is the one on my list that some may qualify as a bad movie, but I have a soft place in my heart for it. This is where I have Cliffhanger. This movie.
I haven't seen it.
I love Cliffhanger. It's
so
a dumb,
fun.
It's a great dumb movie.
Yeah. No, I think you're right.
Speaking of Sly.
Yeah. Sylvester Stallone.
Believe it, that first scene is so iconic, you know.
It's great. Yeah, it's really well done. So I don't know. I guess it's the first scene, so it's not really spoilers, but this is a movie about regret, about the idea of, you know, not being able to save one life and how that impacts the rest of your life. And it's also a movie about mountain climbing ish, you know.
I mean, there's mountain climbing in it.
It's a movie about John Lithgow and his hatred of rabbits. Like it's got everything you want in a good action movie. Lithgow is chewing scenery in this movie, man. He is having so much fun. This
is the first time I saw Lithgow outside of Third Rock from the Sun, and I was like, who is this guy? He's horrifying. And then I saw him in Dexter, and I'm like, oh, so this guy is just a straight up villain if he wants to be. Yeah, totally. Anyhow, check Cliffhanger out if you haven't. It is big, dumb, action fun. So yeah, there you go. That's my number 3. What about you, Andrew? My number 3, it'll get Trump, but I'm going to put Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, I'll trump that.
Yeah.
What is your number 3, Alice?
Recent one, and now we're getting into the movies I'd seen before yesterday. Love and Monsters.
Yeah, I haven't gotten a chance to see this yet. It's on my list, but it's not streaming anywhere yet. So yeah,
isn't it? Oh, it's on
a new
Netflix
movie.
Here. Yeah, it just came out. It was actually nominated for Best Visual Effects at the Oscars this year.
It was. Got an Oscar nomination, yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I saw it. So thank you, Oscars. Otherwise, I would have had 2 movies of Michael Rooker's I would have seen. And I'm sure we can guess which ones they were. But no, this is a fun movie. It's basically about a guy who lives in a post-apocalyptic world where like these alien creatures, well, they're not aliens. They're just like mutant animal monster things have taken over, and he decides to go on a quest across the country to reunite with his ex-girlfriend and have someone, because he's been living a fine life with friends. He doesn't have a couple, and he's feeling like a third wheel, and so he decides to fix that. But it's a really fun adventure movie. You know, there's a dog who's like way smarter than any dog will ever be, and it's got like obviously really good visual effects. Like the care that went into the creation of these monsters are just fantastic. Like, it really elevates the entire movie. Michael Rooker comes in as this like half of this like two, I'd say like pair up between him and a little girl, kind of like father daughter relationship sort of thing, just to show up and then leave later on. But he adds a little bit of comedy, a little bit of fun to it, and yeah, I would say it's a really fun movie to watch for sure. Nothing special, but definitely nothing offensive or anything like that. Like, I had a good time, and I'll probably watch it again sometime in my life for sure.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to take a screenshot from this movie of Dylan O'Brien and you were to ask me if it was a scene from this or Maze Runner, I don't know if I could tell you which one it was from.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very similar in sensibility for sure. But this one's a bit more like less depressing and everything it does.
Nice.
Okay.
Ironically.
Love and Monsters. All right, that brings us to our number 2s. This is where I have Tombstone. So I had it at number 2. Andrew, you had it at number 4, I think. I rewatched this. I hadn't seen it in a long time. I remember enjoying it. This is just like high quality pulpy fun. Like, there's this movie understands like chemistry and filmmaking with a large group. Like, it totally gets the idea of how all of these characters relate to each other. Plus, you've got some great performances.
Oh, Val.
Yeah, Val Kilmer is awesome in this. So yeah, it's a movie that stuck with me, and I could never tell if it was just my nostalgia or not. And I think it's more than that. I think this movie is really well done, and tells an interesting story in an interesting way. And yes, I'm not a Westerns person, but there is something about. It's like it's the most big like summer blockbustery Western ever, in my opinion. Like, there's just an element
Django?
of like. But
No,
Django's
I think even
Django's a different animal. And
I think a blockbuster has to be accessible to like even a little bit of a younger audience,
Yeah.
And Django is definitely not.
Right. Like this is
What do you mean? No.
This is more, Back to the Future than it is, Django Unchained. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's an element of like quirky catchphrases and I'm your Huckleberry,
I'm your Huckleberry.
or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
You tell him I'm coming and I'm bringing hell with me. Yeah, or whatever. It's got those like those big blockbustery moments to it, and yeah, everybody's just kind of having fun together, and it's based on true stuff too, which is always kind of fun and interesting.
Yeah.
So
The OK Corral.
Yeah, the shootout at the OK Corral. So anyhow, Tombstone probably went up my list a few notches from rewatching it. I think it holds up. Now, how much of that might be nostalgia, I have no idea. I am human, but I did have a good time with it.
This is in my top like Westerns of all time, and it's because of the star power behind it. I mean, if you were to look at this cast list, you're like, oh my gosh, everybody who was a BA in a movie ever is in this movie. Powers Booth, Michael Biehn, Val Kilmer, Kurt Russell,
Michael Rooker.
Michael Rooker. Yeah, you have all of these amazing people with their amazing catchphrases. And if,
and then once you think you're done, Charlton Heston shows up. You know what I mean? Like, it just never stops. Like, there's like, it's amazing.
Actually, I learned through a lot of like research and stuff, a lot of those cheesy catchphrases and stuff are things that they actually said, or things that Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday actually said. Like the "I'm coming and hell's coming with me" thing. Apparently, that's something that Wyatt Earp actually said. I don't know about that.
I wonder if that's like spoken history. You know what I mean? Like, it maybe like how history happened. But it's something that they are said to have said.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me just go through, since Andrew mentioned it. I'm just going to go through the cast for you. Who's in this movie? All right, Val Kilmer, Kurt Russell, Sam Elliott, Bill Paxton, Powers Booth. You mentioned Stephen Lang, Charlton Heston. We mentioned Michael Rooker, of course. Jason Priestley shows up in this movie.
Billy Bob Thornton.
Billy Zane. Like, I mean, it's just.
Oh, I forgot Billy Zane was in this movie.
I should also
I need
mention.
to check this out.
I should mention Terry O'Quinn, Locke from Lost, shows up. Like, it's just person after person. You're like, they're in this. And then Robert Mitchum does like the voiceover. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, it's pretty impressive.
It is one of my favorite westerns of all time. It's in my top 10 for sure.
There you go.
And you know me, that's high praise for a western.
Yeah, you love those westerns.
Yeah.
What is your number 2, Andrew?
Me?
Yeah, I think so.
This is where I have Mississippi Burning.
Okay.
Actually, whenever our quarantine first started off, Aaron and I were doing movies that were on our list of shame. That's what we would do. We would like each pick a movie on our list of shame, and the one that I got picked for me was Mississippi Burning. And it's one of those movies like after watching, you're like, whew, that was rough. Okay, I'm gonna need time to process that one because so much happens in it, and so much of it is real. And when I say so much of it is real, I mean there's segments of the movie where they like fake a camera crew coming to this town in Mississippi to like interview the locals and stuff. The people that they interviewed were actual people, you know, who lived in the area, and what they said, racist or not, was genuinely how they felt. And you can feel that born and bred ignorance and hatred, and it just makes your skin crawl. You're like, oh my gosh, like that ups the realism element of this movie to a whole new level. Not even putting aside Gene Hackman and Willem Dafoe, who are just, they're on the same team, but they're tit for tat going back at each other. They're different styles of how to take care of business here. Is so good. Neither one of these guys wants to give up ground. And on top of that, you have Michael Rooker and this whole town. It's such a horrifying but important movie that I highly recommend everybody watch this one for sure.
Yeah, what were your thoughts, Alice?
Well, like I said, I went through and I was like, oh, I've never heard of this movie. Looks interesting. I don't know how. It had like missed me, but I was like, oh, it looks interesting. So I was like, oh, 2 hours. Yeah, okay. Put it in. I will also say, did this as a double feature was super. Very strange night.
That's such a weird double
I can
feature.
imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like, oh my, I can't believe I'd never heard of this movie. Like, it just missed me. I don't know. Obviously, it came out like before I was born and everything. But the fact that it was nominated for like all the Oscars, and it is, you know, should be as known as many of the movies I know before I was born, but I just didn't. And I think it is partly because it is so difficult to watch. Like, I was just horrified by so much of it, but then I was also horrified by the fact that a lot of what they're talking about, obviously not as overtly, but a lot of what's portrayed is still issues we're having to deal with today, and it's still relevant to today. And I'm just like, this sucks. Like, and you know, and but everyone in it is so good. Gene Hackman and Willem Dafoe. I have to say, something I find really interesting is at the beginning of the movie, I was much more on board with Willem Dafoe's sensibilities in terms of like character motivations and everything. I was like, yeah, Willem Dafoe. But then as the movie continues,
get worn down.
You get worn down and you become Gene Hackman into that like whatever it takes sort of situation, because you're like, oh my gosh, you just can't go by the book. You just can't. And then obviously the rest of the movie happens and you're just like, yeah, but I told my partner afterwards, because he was making dinner and he could just see it on the TV, and he was just like, oh my gosh. And I was just like, that was amazing. And I don't know if I'll ever watch it again. Like, it was just so depressing and awful. And, you know, all that aside, Frances McDormand's in it as well. And I was like, oh, hello. Not like I've seen you before. Because I know her in movies like Nomadland and, you know, Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri and stuff. So this is a very different role for me to see her in. But very well made. Like, honestly, if I'd seen this beforehand, this would have probably maybe even been my number one. Like, it was just so well done and just engaging, horrifying, but engaging. And just, yeah, if you haven't seen it, highly recommend that you check it out. Maybe have a comedy lined up afterwards. Not like super comedy. I mean like Pixar comedy.
Something light.
Yes.
Yeah.
A little light watching.
This one's going to stick with you for a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
And unfortunately, Michael Rooker was very well cast in this. Like, I believe that he's the
southern drawl that he has, you know, it lends itself to that particular stereotypical version of that person.
It's got to be so hard as an actor that part of like, I'm going to be really good at this, and people are going to hate me. There's almost like you have to have a part of you that's like, that hears I hate you as you're amazing at your job. Like you just have to be able to like translate it that way or something. But
thank God Guardians came along and he got some levity to a character, you know.
Yeah, he's Mary Poppins, y'all. So that I think brings us to our number ones.
Yeah.
And mine is Guardians of the Galaxy.
I haven't said my number 2 yet.
I'm sorry. That's right. I was thinking that was your number 2. Go ahead. What is your number 2?
Well, okay, we can just move on to number 1s because this is definitely a cheat. I put Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 but I have the other one.
I see what you did. Yeah, in general, we try to keep, like one from the same, but that's fair. I totally
But whenever you haven't seen enough movies,
we'll accept it.
It's fine.
I've only seen 3, not even movies, 3 things he'd been in, unless you count like episodes of Criminal Minds. So I couldn't count those. So...
I thought maybe you were going to cheat by like including like Walking Dead or something like that, or
No, not that far. Just it is a movie that he's in, and I enjoy it. And my number 2 is just I enjoy the first one more. But yeah, really briefly, like you said, he's Mary Poppins, y'all. He definitely gets way more to do in this one than he does in the first one, and it expands his character and makes it way better, in my opinion. And I think this movie is compared to the first one a lot, and so therefore a lot of people see it as lesser, but I still had a lot of fun. I still have a lot of fun. I think it's just like the poster, very colorful, very, insane and fun, and Kurt Russell's fun. Like, it's just exactly what I wanted in a Guardian sequel, So
Guardians is my number 1.
Me too.
As I assume it is Alice's as well. And then Andrew, you had it at number 3. I think.
3.
Listen, there are so many similarities. This is gonna sound weird, but there's so many similarities to this in the Suicide Squad. Like, Gunn is doing very similar things in these movies in taking really weird. Well, surprise, surprise, why I like it more. It's the Suicide Squad with some dampeners put on of, some of those, extreme tendencies or whatever. But you've still got the weird characters here, the great humor, the great team up stuff. It's technically proficient. You understand motivations and story. I think in some ways, James Gunn had the most difficult job of any of the Marvel movies. I think I'm going to stay with that. I was going to add some caveats, but this should never have worked. This is completely different than the rest of Marvel had been leading up to it, as far as where it's located, what it's dealing with. It isn't, a character from Earth, but it does not take place on Earth for the most part. I think he had high level of difficulty, and I think he just nails it, hits it out of the park. Continues to be one of my favorite MCU movies. So, I really, really dig Guardians of the Galaxy. And to be honest, can I be honest? I miss older Groot. I can't wait to get older Groot back. Too. I know everybody loves baby Groot, and teenage Groot, but I'm just like, adult Groot was awesome. And, so anyhow, that's neither here nor there, but I really like this movie. It's perfect in many ways. So,
Yeah, I agree. I think that also part of why it was so difficult, like why he had, in terms of for that movie in the MCU, is the fact that none of these characters, like, we hadn't seen him before. He didn't have the origin stories to fall back on in terms of understanding who these people are. So he had to introduce all these new characters, have us understand who they are, what their sensibilities are, what their motivations are, and then have them go into a team up and have it believable that they would be a team at the end of the movie. So there was a lot of stuff he had to get through in 2 hours, but it is so well done. I will say, yes, obviously it's really funny, the music's really great, all the stuff that everyone knows, but like, part of the reason I really like this movie is the emotional moments. Like, they're very powerful, and that it has one of my favorite scenes in the entire MCU. I could watch that on a loop. In fact, I have. I'll say the scene with the Power Stone when Peter. Spoilers if you haven't seen it, but it's very old by this point. But when Quill grabs the Power Stone and he starts, decaying, and then Gamora's like, take my hand, and he sees his mum, and you got the music
so good.
and the visual effects, and then you see all
one
of
of
them.
the characters sees their mom in this movie. Like, I mean, it's just like the Suicide Squad. So
Exactly. Not quite the same way. I'll say.
what? I don't understand.
But and then you see like Drax grab the shoulder, and then you see Rocket's hand go up and grab him, and then you have the big da da da, and you have them like all, and then he's like, because we're at the Guardians of the Galaxy. Boop. I won't say because I know we're not meant to swear on the show, but like when he says it, and then he destroys. Oh, it's so good. I just love that scene so much, and it makes me, the bit where he sees his mum makes me cry every time. Yeah, it's a good movie.
It is. It's really good. All right, Andrew, what do you have at number 1?
This is where I have JFK, and there might be a little bit of recency bias because whenever you posted the best ever challenge for this week, I'm like, I guess I'll finally watch JFK. So I only watched it within the last week.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. Whoa.
It is quite a movie. It is quite a movie.
It is not what I expected. Honestly, I had no knowledge going into this about the movie, obviously. I know 11/22/63, that everybody knows the story of JFK being assassinated. I thought that going into this, I thought Costner was going to play a JFK. I thought that it was going to be like a JFK biofilm leading up to the time in Dallas. But no, JFK gets shot right at the beginning of this movie, and you're like, oh, okay, so is it going to be a flashback? And then you see Kevin Costner's not playing. I'm like, what is this movie? And then it turns into this crazy movie, all based on true story, by the way. Jim Garrison, I think is the guy's name, who actually is Costner's portraying, who is the DA of New Orleans. He goes down this rabbit hole to where by the end of this movie, I don't know what's true anymore. I don't know if Lee Harvey Oswald was the one who shot Kennedy or not, because the amount of stuff that this movie brings to light, and the stuff that was, I know a lot of it's dramatized, because above all else, it is a movie, but I think Oliver Stone is one of those directors who puts truth above entertainment.
He's a bit of a conspiracy theorist himself, though.
He is a bit of a conspiracy theorist, but there's enough in this movie to where, like, you know what, that really doesn't add up. A lot of this stuff that I've been told my whole life about, I'm not saying that I'm 100% convinced that Oswald was a patsy or anything, but like, I'm questioning stuff now, man. I'm questioning stuff. There is a scene in this movie. Donald Sutherland talks for 15 minutes straight, uninterrupted. And it's one of the most fascinating moments of the movie. It's kind of the deep throat it's not deep throat, obviously, but is that spy who you can't name, so you just give them a pseudonym. And I think it was X in this movie, but it's the deep throat personification of like a super top secret military government personnel dropping or spilling the beans to somebody, and it's him talking. I think they timed it. It was something like 16 and a half minutes he's talking straight. And I'm just like, whoa, talk about a monologue. That is an incredibly long time. But I was hooked from the beginning of him talking to the end. And this movie ends with an emotional speech by Costner that just makes me, you feel the emotion in this speech. In this movie, Tommy Lee Jones, rightfully nominated for an Academy Award for supporting actor, because this is a performance from him like the likes of which I'd never seen before. It's a great movie. I love it.
Yeah, I agree. This is the Reading the Cast episode of Sif Pop, but like Kevin Costner, Gary Oldman, Jack Lemmon, Ed Asner, Kevin Bacon, Walter Matthau,
Yeah.
You mentioned Tommy Lee Jones, Sissy Spacek, Joe Pesci, Vincent D'Onofrio. Like it's just like it keeps on going. John Candy,
John Candy's
Brian
in
Doyle
this
Murray.
too.
Yeah, Wayne Knight shows up in this movie. It's
Michael
just
Rooker.
and Michael Rooker. So yeah, it's just
Every
it's
single
one of those
time I see
movies.
Wayne Knight, I'm like, hello, Newman. I don't think you can help it.
Yeah, it is one of those movies that it will have you questioning what really happened, and that's okay because none of us were
on
there.
my
We don't know.
list.
But
When I have
it's
3
an
hours.
undertaking. It's over 3 hours long. Honestly,
I'll be honest,
like
this was one of the ones I was most interested in when I went through his filmography, but it was just like it was like in that time I could watch both of these other movies.
You're not wrong.
100% understand.
You're not
And
wrong.
honestly, if it wasn't for this this challenge, I would have put it off even further because it is such an undertaking.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
after
agreed.
watching it, I'm so glad that I did. I'm so glad.
Yeah,
that
I think with this stuff, you just kind of have to go, would I watch a 3-episode miniseries on this? And the answer is usually yes. So just kind of treat it in your mind like, 3-hour-long episodes of a miniseries that's going to be starring the best actors of their time. And then the 3 hours doesn't seem so daunting. At least that's how my brain works for some reason.
I normally don't mind really long movies. Like I genuinely don't. It's just more so finding the time. I was like, I know I need to have at least 5 movies on this list. And so but it's definitely one that I want to see.
Yeah.
Well, also the way that Stone shoots this movie, because he does it in a way to where he gets really close to the actors. And like sometimes he'll even like get so close to where all you see is their mouth. And it feels like you're getting let in on a secret. It feels like, oh, you're not supposed to know this. But then they also do those like 5 FPS black and white flashbacks, of like this is how it could have possibly happened and then it'll cut back to the whisper, this is how it happened. And you're like, oh my gosh, is this how it happened? I can't believe this. But at the end of the day, it's just a fascinating story.
Back into the left. Back.
Yeah, to the left.
Speaking of things that go on and on and on, this megapod continues. Because none of us had honorable mentions in this one. We barely got our 5 out. Yeah, okay, there we go. So let's go on to our buried treasure, and we will finish out with this. And Alice, you are the guest, so you get to close things out. Andrew, why don't you start us off this time? What's your buried treasure this week?
I've got a book for everybody that I would highly recommend.
A book?
Yes. Jurassic Park.
Ooh, I like it.
I finally got around to reading the book.
I've actually read this book. I did not expect that.
I cannot believe how different the book is from the movie. It is so different.
It's great though, right?
It's so good. Honestly, if they were to do like a true adaptation, like a mini series of this book that like didn't have anything to do with the movies, and like they made it like this movie, or this book I should say, sorry.
So good it's like a movie.
It is so good because you get so invested you just can't put it down. But it's one of those where like, oh, Jurassic Park was supposed to be a horror movie, like a dark rated R deeply disturbing horror movie. Like I had I'd heard there were differences. Like I'd heard John Hammond is the villain, and stuff like that. Like John Hammond in the movie is like this Icarus old man who just wanted to bring some magic into the world. That is not this John Hammond in the book. No. Alan Grant, like the characters are so different from who they are in the movie. Alan Grant,
you know who the real Muldoon is.
Yeah, exactly. The real Muldoon's super cool, and he can do stuff besides say clever girl. But like Alan Grant is like this old grizzly looking man who loves kids. He thinks they're fun, and I'm like, that's not the Alan Grant I know. And Ellie is like his student. She's like 20 years old and he's like 45, and I'm like, oh, okay, so that's different. They're not together It's just it's his student. I saw. I was just like, oh, that's not right. But no.
I was like,
No,
oh,
they're
I'm
not
glad
together.
they changed that.
And
Okay,
the kids are different too. The boy, I forget his name. Timmy's like 10 years old, and Lexi, the girl, is 6. He's the older brother, and she is just this little kid who he has to try and take around Jurassic Park. And there are more dinosaurs. There are more like attacks in the book. It's crazy. I loved every minute of it. I want to see the true adaptation of Jurassic Park, like just a standalone. Don't do Lost World. Don't do Jurassic World or anything like that. Just do this, like a standalone, true adaptation. I think it would be fascinating and terrifying. Even now, I saw Jurassic Park when I was way too young. 93, I think it was 9 or somewhere around there. And I still went to see it, and it scared the crap out of me, but it got my love of dinosaurs going. I think if they adapted this now for screen, I would still get scared.
Yeah,
it's way, way different and way more
I think
terrifying.
You're right. I think they could. I think they could do a miniseries based on the book, and it would feel so much different than the movie that they could get away with it. There might be a revolt. Like, people might be like, "Why are you trying to, remake one of the most amazing movies?" But then I think you've got a real easy. I think you've got a real easy argument against that, and say, "No, we're not remaking Jurassic Park. We are doing a different spin on the book, a more, that sticks closer to the book." So, yeah, I'd never thought of that, Andrew. I actually really like that idea. So I don't think it'll happen. They're obviously trying to do the Jurassic World thing. I don't think Universal is interested in like a TV miniseries or something like that. But boy, I bet it could work. Okay, I will go next. I watched the documentary on Prime called Val. This is the documentary about Val Kilmer. Created and produced by Val Kilmer. And it is, I am surprised about how moved I was by this. If you had asked me before this podcast, if you had told me, Aaron, you're going to get emotional and cry during this podcast, I would have guaranteed you it would have been talking about Val and not the Suicide Squad. But honestly, that thing I was talking about movies being about empathy, that's what I really felt during this documentary, because lots of times with documentaries, you will hear people say, and I tend to agree, that the filmmakers make themselves too much part of the documentaries these days. Like, what they think about the subject, what their take is on it, becomes kind of the central focus, as opposed to exploring the truth of whatever they're talking about. The difference here is this is a movie. It is autobiographical, right? Like, this is him telling his own story, and I found that beautiful, because I kind of wish we all could do this, where we all got to say, here is a 90-minute to 2-hour documentary about my life. This is my narrative. This is how I saw my life. I think that's beautiful. And it gives you this chance to really see people's own vision of themselves and who they are and what that means. Does that mean it's one-sided? Sure, probably. Yeah, it's very biased. Obviously, but it's still beautiful, because you get to see this is how Val Kilmer saw himself, right? Or sees himself, I should say. I'm kind of, unfortunately speaking, like he's gone. He is not. This is how he sees himself. And I learned a lot. And beyond that, I felt like I really got to experience this human being and their, pathos through their life, and kind of, what they've experienced. The stuff that he talks about also, if you're a movie lover, will be really interesting. He had a video camera with him for most of his life. So there's like behind the scenes stuff you've never seen from like all his movies. Top Gun, Tombstone, Ghost in the Darkness. There's some really interesting Batman. The Batman part of this is really interesting too. So this is a high recommend for me. I learned a lot. I felt like I experienced, Val Kilmer's narrative, how he tells his own story in a really positive way that helped me to identify with him. And I cried a couple times in this, not necessarily because the movie was that surface level emotional. I just had those moments where I was like, this is what filmmaking is. Like, this is, this is the ability for us to tell our stories. And he's telling his story. And I don't know. I found it really, really beautiful. And it allowed me to connect to, my favorite part of filmmaking, which is, again, the empathy, being able to put yourself in somebody else's world and somebody else's shoes. High recommend for me. It is on Prime. It's called Val.
All right.
All right, Alice, finish us off.
Yeah, so I this week saw the end of the new Apple TV Plus show Physical, and can recommend it. So I went in, I was just kind of like, when I first saw it pop up on my screen, I was like, yeah, it looks interesting. I like Rose Byrne, Aussie represent. I'm always there for, Aussie stars doing good. And then I saw this, and I thought this was going to be just like, maybe like a bit of a comedy, maybe a bit of a, slice of life sort of thing. It's really not. So just to give you guys an idea of what's about, Rose Byrne plays Sheila, who is a woman in California, like the Californian suburbs, and she's like grossly unhappy with her life, but not because of anything. It'd be really easy to have her have just like a traditionally horrible husband, or people constantly putting her down, or a bad situation. Like, she's living a perfectly fine life. Her husband's not great, but he's not a bad person necessarily. Her life isn't bad, but it's mostly to do with the fact that she has this internal voice, if you will, that is constantly weighing her down. And as a result, she has this routine of binge purging, where she will, like, when she can't handle things, she'll drive into a fast food store, buy 3 burgers, book a motel room, eat them all, get naked, eat them all, purge them all up, shower, and then go on with her day.
Bulimic.
And so, yeah, very bulimic, yeah. And so, but it's only in like spouts. It's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then she's at the mall one day, and she discovers this like aerobic studio, and it helps her kind of become more whole. And then you're watching her on this show as she journeys. Her husband goes up for local election. You see her become more of herself, become more confident in who she is, make relationships, finally make connections. And it's a really interesting exploration into mental illness and self-harm, but not in the traditional ways of like, that you've seen normally on TV or or movies. And it's uncomfortable. Like, after a while it's overbearing to hear her voice talk to her in the way that she does, but it's like, that's how it is. Like, once you lean into it, it's just, and Rose Byrne is just fantastic, like absolutely fantastic in this show. It is worth watching just for her performance. But it is just a really interesting look into this time in the 80s when aerobics was starting to become a thing, but then on the background of this housewife essentially, who's finally finding who she is, and showing that just because your life isn't horrible like traditionally doesn't mean that you are happy, and that's okay. And it's just, yeah, I really recommend. Every episode's only like 30 minutes. There's only, 10 episodes, so it's not very long. Yeah, can recommend if that's something that interests you, for sure. I'm very excited. This is going to be a season 2 as well.
Nice.
Gonna add it to the list. I'm going to add it to the list of all the other Apple shows I'm watching right now. So
I was going to say they're quietly amassing a pretty decent bunch of shows.
Yeah.
I'm into Ted Lasso.
So good.
Yeah.
Schmigadoon's hilarious.
I'm into Schmigadoon. Yeah, definitely. I know the Joseph Gordon-Levitt one just launched. I'm curious about that.
Mythic Quest.
Mythic Quest is fun.
C's coming back for a season 2, which I love.
Morning show,
Morning show, of course. Yeah.
That's
Apple.
interesting. I
didn't think they'd be a player.
But they're definitely at least putting together some quality content, in my opinion. So,
and their
there you go.
movies too, like Wolfwalkers and Greyhound. Like,
sure, yeah.
Oh yeah,
Wolfwalkers is gorgeous. Yeah, that's
I need to watch
movie.
that still.
So Jurassic Park is a book available at your well, I was going to say at your local bookstore if you still have one of those.
You can go to
or
Audible.
could-
Go to
or you
Audible
could
and
go-
get the audiobook.
There you go.
There you
There you go. Val is on Amazon Prime, and Physical is on Apple TV Plus. We did it, guys. We did a podcast. We set out to accomplish it. It took us longer than usual, but we managed to get it done. Well done to us. And thanks so much for joining us today. Civ Pop is part of the Studio DNA Podcast Network. You can find out more about other shows on the network at studiodna.media or by searching Studio DNA in your podcast player. Huge thanks to Andrew for hanging out again today.
Thank you, buddy.
Big thanks to producer Phil for producing the audio and video show.
Thank you, Phil.
Oh, we're reverted.
Yep.
Thank you to Drew for putting together visuals for the show. And thank you to Alice for coming and hanging out with us once again. Always great to have you on. Go ahead and tell people where they can find you. Anything you want to promote? Now is your time.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, Ali G Mick on MICH, so Mitch, if you want to pronounce it how it's spelled. That's on Instagram and Letterboxd. You can find me. I'm also a writer at civpop.com. My new one-stop pop where I recommend media based on a popular TV show or movies about to drop for last month, which is based on Loki. So if you liked Loki, check out the article. And then, as I say always, doing the MCU rewatch with my friends. You can find that at Once Upon a Marathon with a dot in between each word on Instagram. And we have just entered phase 3, which means we're coming up to the big one, boys. It's going to be good. We are very excited.
Yeah. Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Yeah, can't wait.
That's exactly what I was talking about. Yeah.
Thank you also to our Civ Pop members for giving monthly to make Civ Pop a real thing. Support starts at $3 a month. You can check out all the information at patreon.com/CivPop. Lots of fun stuff there. Also, you can connect with the podcast by leaving a comment, a rating, or a review at Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. And if you've got a question for us, you can, or even a comment, you can send that by email. That still exists. feedback@civpop.com if you want to let us know. And finally, if you're having a good time, your movie-loving friends will probably like the show too, so make sure you let them know about it and that listening is much easier than rowing a homemade trash boat through the Florida Keys. We will be back next
Then it's
week
not that hard.
with Free Guy and Respect, couple anticipated films. We will see you then. RESPECT. Tell them what it means to
As
me.
soon as you said that, that immediately started playing in my mind.
She's so incredible.
Oh.
Aretha.
Well, I recently watched the Genius season on her on Disney Plus. You know,
Oh.
the National Geographic show. They did Albert Einstein, they did Picasso, and now they've done. I don't know if you guys have heard of the show.
No.
Maybe I'm making a buried treasure. Oh, well, you got Jeffrey Rush playing Albert Einstein in season 1. You got Antonio Banderas playing Pablo Picasso in season 2, and then you got Cynthia Erivo playing Aretha Franklin in season 3. And then
Ooh.
yeah, I should have made that my buried treasure. Oh,
That's
well,
fun.
next time. It's
Next
good.
time.
It's very
Next
good.
time.
Einstein season's my favorite for sure.
Thank you to those
Okay.
still hanging out
What's
with
it
us
called
this much
again?
longer.
On Disney Plus?
Genius.
Genius. Okay.
Genius. Appreciate you guys. Love you guys. We will catch you on the next show. Hopefully next week. We'll see you then.
Bye.